Greetings and welcome to another video, which this time is about maker things, about a maker technique, specifically rotocasting. And rotocasting is where you take typically a resin, a liquid resin to which you add a catalyst which will make it set, and you put the liquid resin into a mould and you rotate the mould, that's the roto bit, and you keep rotating the mould until the resin has fully set, and then once it's really finally cured you can take the thing out of the mould and you've ended up creating a hollow pot in a mould as opposed to just filling a mould with a resin and making a solid pot. And I remember being very excited about rotocasting probably about 20 years ago when I first did it. I was making various models of things. Maybe I'll come on to what I was making in another video, but anyway, I was making various models and I thought, I don't want to make these solid parts. It's given me all sorts of problems using masses of material, and it's also pulling the molds out of shape and things. What if I just put the resin into the mold and just rotated it for a long while until it eventually set? And would it work? And it did work. I went, wow, I've invented a whole new technique. And of course I hadn't, because people have been doing it for years. It's just back in those days we didn't have the internet to look at and check out what was going on in the way we can today. Well, we had the internet, but not so much stuff on there, as it were. And you work things out yourself. And we've lost a bit of that these days, haven't we? You just look everything up and everything's always there and you know what it's called straight away. Anyway, the video's about rotocasting, and what are we going to rotocast? Well, you know already because you've seen the video title and the thumbnail and things like that. We're going to be rotocasting a small Stormtrooper helmet. And down here I've got quite a lot, as you can see, of small Stormtrooper helmets. Shall we take a closer look? Here we go. Here are three of my tiny Rotocast Stormtrooper helmets. You can see they're made of resin, or you can hear them made of resin, and inside they're sort of, well, empty. I painted them black so you couldn't see what's inside. And if we just move these along a bit, actually you can see I also did that one, which I think is a Shadow Trooper, isn't it? It didn't work very well, that one. And there's some very old ones here. Here's ones that have been on my kitchen windowsill where they were for a long, long time. I quite like the look of these, but literally they were that colour. It's just after a long while, many, many years, they sort of fade. And this one obviously was a Shadow Trooper at one point, wasn't it? And then changed the colour and things. Anyway, you can tell I've had endless fun with these tiny little helmets. And in fact, I have made bigger ones as well, and we're going to be making one of the bigger ones, but we'll stay with the small ones for a while because these ones are okay for a minute, aren't you? You're okay? Yes, we're okay for a minute. That's good. Let's go back to these. And the tiny helmets like this are made from a latex mould, and I've got the mould over here. And I've not actually looked at this mould for a very long time. I've just literally got it out of the cupboard this afternoon, and like many things on this channel, it's a voyage of discovery into my past. I'll take off the little thing there, and I've left it in the bag to keep it okay. And here it is. This is the mould for this helmet. This is a latex mould, and you make a latex mould by basically painting latex onto whatever you're making a mould of and doing loads and loads and loads of coats, and eventually you end up with a mould like that, which seems to be still in quite good condition. Really, it must be. I don't know how old it is. It's a good maybe 15 years old, something like that. So it's held up rather well. That's the benefit of keeping things in a bag, isn't it? Anyway, you might be thinking, what did I use to make this mould? And the answer to that, if I can find it, is down here somewhere. This is a Stormtrooper from some manufacturer or other, and as you can see, it's got a head because they tend to, and I made this a latex mould using this head. I think it comes off, actually. It does. Poor little guy. He's had his head removed. Probably he deserves it for being cruel to lots of rebel scum, doesn't he? But anyway, this is what I used to make the mould. Basically painted my latex coats on that. I think it probably took about, I would guess, 20 or 30 coats. I wonder if his head goes back on again. Probably does. Oh, it does. Phew, that's good, isn't it? Anyway, that's how I made the tiny little ones. And once I'd done these, I thought, could I make a bigger Stormtrooper helmet that way and have loads of those around? And that got me to move on to these. So again, I think we should cut back into a close-up to see these things in their full glory. And I remember being very pleased with these particular models. I always intended to make more of them, and I only ever made two at the time. So I'm going to make another one in this video. And one of the reasons I like them is they've actually got proper lenses in the eyes. The eye is not a casting that's painted. I've got a torch here. I don't know if I can actually, well, I can turn it on. There we are. Will it actually show that the end? Oh yes, you can see the green green of the eyes there, can't you, on that Stormtrooper just about, so you can see the eyes here are actually got little lenses in. I don't know why it really matters, because I haven't got a very small person to wear this helmet and look out of those lenses, but anyway, you can see what's going on. And if you're thinking, how did I make the mould for these? I've got it somewhere, oh, it's down here, there we are, I used this. This was a Star Wars bobblehead, which came with a little tiny body, and I got rid of that. I got this purely to make the mould for making these, and it was a bit deformed and things. It's a sort of rubbery stuff, but I actually put various bits of plastic inside to make it more the shape I wanted, and then around the bottom, as you can see, I built it up so I could take a mould properly from it. And that mould I've got, guess what, over here. It's also been in hiding in a cupboard for a very long time, and again we'll take off the thing. I hope this mould's okay, because if it's not, this video isn't going to work. And come on, there, whoa, this is the mould for this particular helmet. Hello, I've seen you before. Yes, I was. You were made inside me, so it was. And looks okay, seems to be strong. So this is the mould we're going to be using to make our helmet. And in addition to the mould, we need another thing, and that is some resin. And do you know where my resin is? Neither do I. I knew I'd got some resin. I'm sure I've got some resin somewhere, but I can't find it. So I can't go, this is the resin I'm going to use. I'll have to do that in the next segment of the video. I'll have to go and get some new resin, which is probably a good idea, because I might have had 10-year-old resin around, and best not to try that in the mould. I always think you shouldn't mess around with materials, because you could destroy moulds which take a long time to make. And if you're thinking, if you pour resin into this mould and rotate it, Chris, it's going to get a bit deformed as you do it, you're right. I need to mount this mould on something solid, and that will allow me to rotate it properly. So I'm going to go now and make something to mount this on, get some resin, and when I've done that, we will do some roto casting. Greetings, here I am back again. I've now got some resin, as you can see, 500 millilitres. I normally buy 250, but I can only get a 500, so I can make loads and loads of models. Some Isopon fast glass resin, as you can see, normally used to repair boats and cars and things like that, but I've been using it to make models and parts for many, many years. You can get specialist resins for that, but I find this works well, so I keep using it. And you also have to have some hardener, as we'll be using in a second. And I've also taken our mould and I've mounted it, as you can see, on a piece of cardboard, so I can hold it via the cardboard and rotate it around. And as you can probably also see, I'm wearing some gloves to be nice and safe, and I'm working outside. So apologies for any road noise or interruptions on the audio, but I don't like working with resins indoors. So let's pour out some resin. I'm pouring it here into a pie dish. This I think initially had a chicken pie in it, but you can use pie dishes that contain other sort of beverages if you like. There we are, we've got some resin. And now we have to add some hardener. In my younger days, I worried greatly about adding the exact amount of hardener, and in the end these days I get it roughly right. You can read the instructions, but that looks roughly okay to me. And we're now going to mix it up using a mixing stick. And this mixing stick used to be bindweed. I grew it in my own garden, this mixing stick. And as you can see, I'm going to keep fast forwarding through here. This is a tricky thing to film. I've never before filmed working with resin on camera. Obviously, resin and cameras don't go well together anyway. And this is obviously a process which is time limited. Now I've actually mixed in the resin, I have to get working with it pretty quickly. But that seems to have mixed together quite nicely, so it's time to now put it, I think, into the mould. And I am struggling to get things so you can see them properly on camera here. This is a really tricky thing to shoot, because I have to be able to see into this mould, and so do you. So we will see how we do. But that's, I think, as much resin as is going to go in has gone in. And that's okay. We don't have to come right to the top of this mould, because in the end the top bit is purely for mounting, so actually that's going to be cut off. I'm just going to take it round initially like that. This is rotating. Hopefully you can see roughly what's going on there. I've got the camera thrown into automatic. I never have the camera on automatic, but I have for this. And I've now started working with my special tool, which, as you can probably see, is a bent large paper clip. And I use this so I can just go around inside, making sure there's no places in the mould where there might be problems with bubbles or things not having filled quite rightly. I'm just going to take this off camera so I can see it from a different angle. Sorry about that. And there we are. I'm back again. I am now quite confident the mould is properly covered inside. And now we are just down to being a manual rotocasting machine, which is very exciting. I'll try and get to a proper place on screen. There we are. Hopefully you can see what is going on. Get my special tool out of the way. There we are. I've even got a movie light over there. Oh dear. Now look, you see, that's what happens when you're working with this stuff on camera, because I was looking at the camera and not looking at you. Deary me. I'm not going to do that again. So anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Make sure when you work with resin you have everything set up so you've got lots and lots of things to mop up mess and that type of stuff, because it inevitably happens, although you don't normally do it when you're trying to see backwards on the camera. I've done it again, haven't I? Don't look at the camera screen, Chris. Keep looking at that. And I think I've learnt my lesson now. I'm going to keep this going round nice and happily and not talking to you, and we'll keep going round until things are getting set. And I've now been turning for what feels like forever, but probably isn't. But we're now just on the point of change. I can just see it is still rolling around, but it's a lot more viscous, the liquid inside here now. Nice word, that, viscous, isn't it? Shall we all say together, viscous? What a lovely word. Anyway, we're almost at the end of this rotocasting process. And yes, I think we're there. This is the point where I stop putting any pressure on the mould at all myself, but I think that is now fully done. I don't know if you can see inside there very well. I can see fairly well, and I think that's now done. We've got a big glob of stuff at the top of the mould, but that won't have any problems for us. So I'm now just going to invert this like that, and I will now leave this now on a clean piece of surface to finally cure. Right, it's now about an hour and a half later, something like that, and everything seems to have cured nicely. And I've got two bits of good news and one bit of bad news. The bits of good news are that firstly, I've managed to do some resin work without getting any on my hands. I don't think that's ever happened before. And secondly, as I've just said, everything has cured up absolutely fine. But the bad news is I've realised that big sort of gloop of fiberglass at the top of this thing is because I've made a fundamental error here. Because what I've been doing when I've been rotating this, I've been so keen to make sure you could see things on camera looking in there somewhere, that I've kept it too angled like that rather than keeping it angled sort of like this. So I've actually allowed a lot of resin to gather at the bottom, which hasn't been distributed around the edges, and eventually it's ended up being a big gloop at the front, or the front at the back, and the top of the helmet. And this won't affect, I don't think, the final casting we get, providing there's enough gone around the edges, it'll be strong enough to come out the mould. We'll see about that in a second. But it does mean we won't be able to cut out the little eyes on this Stormtrooper because there's masses and masses of resin behind them, and it's very difficult to cut out the holes and even out the insides and fit little lenses. So if I ever meet a very, very small person who wishes to do a cosplay of the Stormtrooper, they'll have to borrow one of my other helmets. These are going to have painted lenses. Anyway, that all noted, let's get this off the base. I always get amazed at how strong masking tape is. Let me just take off the masking tape. There we go, and a little bit of resin holding that in there. And in theory, we can get this off. There'll be various small bits of resin at the edges, don't matter. They will clearly snap because they're very thin, but hopefully we can roll back the whole mould. Oh, look, this is looking like it's going to work. Come on, you little swine. I've taken this mould off several times before, well, twice before, and how did I do it? Did I roll around the top? I think I did. And yes, this is going to come off. Front bit is always tricky, and whoa, I think it's worked, and we've got everything we need to make our little model. So I'm pleased with that. That is a good result. We'll be able to remove the excess, clean this up, and paint up our Stormtrooper helmet. Guess what? I've cast another one. So let's get it out of the mould. And here, whilst making the cast, I've focused on getting the resin nice and evenly distributed around the inside. And here we are, another, it seems, successful rotocast of a tiny Stormtrooper helmet. But this time the inside should be completely hollow, hopefully it is. Yes, and it should therefore be possible to cut out the visor holes and to fit some tiny little see-through lenses. But before that, it's time to open up my old Dremel-like friend, Mr. Spinney, all ready to offer his assistance, as I'm now very carefully going to start removing the flashing. And there's quite a bit to remove from this second casting, and it's tough stuff. So my method is to initially cut things away with this tiny rotary saw blade, and I'd stress again that this needs doing with great care, and also whilst wearing a mask and goggles to avoid any flying shards of resin and to avoid breathing in the very fine dust that's being created. In addition to great care, this is also a job to attack with a copious dollop of patience. But we do in time make progress with our rotary tool now having changed to a sanding thingy, as the remaining material to remove is less substantial. And here we are now working on the first casting, which was far easier to clean up, which in the final phase of cleanup I work on by hand with sandpaper. Meanwhile, we mustn't forget to open up the visor holes on the second casting. And again, this is a modelling task that requires a great deal of care and much patience. And within time, Mr. Spinney once again making way to hand tools as things progress towards completion. And here we are with our final cleaned up castings, and I think they've come out rather nicely. I like my eye cutouts on this one, you probably gathered that by now, although it'll be interesting to compare the two final models, one with painted eyes, one with cut-out eyes with actual lenses. And it is worth noting that in fact the first casting here is a slightly better casting. On both models the resin has held the detail very well. I'm always amazed how well it does work, but there were a few places, particularly on the second casting, where there were some slight problems. You can see that probably here just below the mic tips, got a few little holes there. And so what I'm going to do is to take some of this, some Humbrol model filler, just to fill in any slight imperfections in our casts. And then when that is done, it'll be time to head off to the Imperial paint shop. And here we are with our final helmets, and I'm very pleased with the way they've turned out. I started the painting process by adding some of the recessed detail colours before applying black to the inside. And I did this partially for aesthetic reasons, but also so that all surfaces would be covered, which seals in the smell of the resin. Next, I gave both helmets a first coat of white primer, after which, like most things after a first prime, they looked absolutely terrible. But 2 coats of gloss on lots of detail painting later, we have our final result, which I'm pleased with. Oh look, they can face each other like that. That's nice, isn't it? Hello, hello. And if you're wondering, all of the top coat painting was done with Humbrol enamel paints, and I might make a future video going through a painting process. Oh, and on this helmet, the final job was to fit its lenses, which were a piece of this, a piece of a green lighting gel, exactly as used on the original stunt Stormtrooper helmets. And I can hopefully demonstrate that if I bring the torch in, like that. And can we get the torch behind? Where have we got to be? About like that. Oh, I can't line it up properly. There, oh yes, we can see it's got proper little lenses, proper little bits of green. Or we can see straight through his green lenses. And on the other side, of course, painted lenses, he can't see out quite as well. So I think what we should now do is to introduce these to other members of their legion. So let's just put them in here and here like that. There we go. Always safety in numbers. Well, possibly not, but they try to have safety in numbers. I want to get it lined up properly. There we are. And it's interesting that the new helmets, all painted with the same paint, are very, very slightly whiter than these, aren't they? These have been done a few years ago. Maybe these guys have been posted to Tatooine for an extended period and their armour has faded, something like that. And as you might have noticed, on the first ones of these I didn't manage to retain and paint in with little blue markings on the edges here. I've done that on my new helmet. So they are even better than my first attempts. And if you're wondering how exciting it's been rotocasting these Stormtrooper helmets, I think I'm going to rate this project at an 8 on the excitement scale, because I always find it really satisfying doing anything where you start with a liquid and you end up with final solid models. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.